Hello, it's Kim Murden here, Lewis herbalist and storyteller. Now it's March 31st, 2020, and it's pretty cold in my garden. So whilst I wanted to go out and plant some more seeds, not so. So your gain. I'm going to talk to you about one of my most favourite plants of the dispensary, nettle, or otherwise known in Latin as Urtica dioica. And it may surprise you that something that you consider as a rather irritating weed and something you want to avoid on footpaths is used medicinally. In fact, nettle has a very long, well, actually, I should say humans have a very long association with nettle. We've used it for materials, whether that's cordage, so it's making, ropes and strings, and that's a skill that some people still use and will teach you. Someone like Native Hands, my lovely friend Ruby Taylor, go and look her up, Ruby Taylor's Native Hand courses, when we're allowed to get out and about again. And it's also been used as a cloth material. So some of you will know about Hans Christian Andersen's story, The 11 Swans, which is about a sister who finds her 11 beloved brothers bewitched, turned into swans, and the task she is set is to gather in a load of nettle fibre and spin that and weave that into shirts. And when she throws them over the brothers, they're transformed back into her human brothers. So that points to a long association that humans have with it as a cloth material. And indeed, in, I think, the First World War, in certain countries, I think including Britain, if I'm right, when cotton became in short supply, nettle fibre was resorted to again. Also, it's used as a foodstuff and has been used as a foodstuff, whether that's for our livestock. Chickens love eating the seeds. It's been fed to cattle and horses, to make horses' coats shine. There's traditions where if you feed cattle nettle in Ireland, that they won't be bewitched by the small people. So, we think these are kind of maybe rather charming stories, but there's always a grain of truth absolutely in what's going on there, an indication of how humans relate to plants. It's rich in rennet. It's one of the vegetable sources of rennet, so the component you use to help cheese set, so it would have been used in the dairy, and I think it still is actually. There's certain cheese producers in Britain who wrap their cheese truckles in nettle leaf as well. And what else? It's got full of chlorophyll, so there's a green, and that's used in the food and health industry still to colour things. So those are just some of the modern day and old uses I can think of that are just beyond herbal use. So let's look at the etymological roots of the words nettle and urtica. So nettle comes from the Anglo-Saxon. I don't know how you pronounce it, so I'll put the word up on screen so you can look at that. So from needle, and I think that's to do with its association with cloth work. And the Latin is from to burn, so we know that nettles sting, and other sort of common names for nettles, I think, like ant bite and things. Now that's interesting because if we look closely at a nettle leaf, though, you see all the serrations on it, that there's little spikes, and in those little spikes, those are the glands that have the acid in it, the formic acid. So this is a very simple acid that ants have as well. So that's what's stinging us when we brush against the edge of the leaf. If you grip the leaf by the middle, there you won't get stung. It's the outer edges. And whenever a plant is going to that length to protect itself with stings or spikes, usually we can deduce that it has something pretty useful that it wants to hold on to. It doesn't want other predatory creatures intruding upon. So we can think about the constituents of nettle. It is a super, super nutritious plant. It's got iron, calcium, copper, silica, phosphorus. I think it's got potassium. vitamin A, vitamin C. I've probably forgotten some. The list is so extensive. And that is why, number one, it's a highly valued food crop by those of us who know how to go out and pick it at this time of year. So it's about March through to, around about the end of April usually is a good time to collect it. So shall we do that first? We'll look at the how to make nettle soup, and I'll put up some pictures and films of me harvesting the tips. So you collect the very top bit, the first four leaves at the top. Use your rubber gloves, otherwise you will get stung, unless you really want to have a bit of nature cure. And just gather it up, a bag full, a colander full, and you can then wash it in salt water, and then you can use it like spinach. And I make nettle soup, and so I was just saute some onions and put in. Then once they're done, I add some chopped potatoes and stock and seasoning of my choice, and cook that for 10-15 minutes. And for the last 5 minutes, I'll add the nettles that I've washed and drained. So once you've plucked the nettles, the sting will die away, so you won't get stung, and heat destroys the sting as well. So when you eat it, you won't burn your mouth at all. Indeed, actually, you can roll up. You can take a fresh nettle leaf and fold all the outer bits of the leaf inwards, so all those stinging glands are folded inwards, and then you can have a little kind of nettle pilule. So that's quite fun to do as well. And children, that's quite a good one to make your dads do if you're a bit bored with them and you're taking them out for a walk. So that's nettle soup, and it's traditionally over human history. We've come out of winter and things have been very slow and dark and stodgy, and we haven't got a lot of fresh green growth. So nettle is one of those spring foods, and you can see if I've mentioned all the nutritious qualities of it, it's going to be such a nutritious boost to us. And indeed, when you eat it, you can feel it. It's almost like taking a kind of power dose of something, really, if you haven't ever done it before. We love it, and we've made our first bowl of nettle, big batch of nettle soup, and we'll do some more. And in terms of how nettle grows, it's often said that nettle travels around wherever human beings go. And if you walk along footpaths or go through farmyards or old historic sites, invariably nettle is there. It's a perennial plant, so that means it comes up every year. It can spread itself by its root system, which has runners going out, and it also can spread itself by seed. So wherever humans are, you're going to find nettle. And the sort of caveat, or the things we need to know, really, while it's a pretty mild, gentle herb to use medicinally, there's some things we need to know about when we're gathering it. So it's a nitrogen feeder. It loves feeding on nitrogen, and it's very good for cleansing sort of toxic soil sites as well. The two important caveats really is if it's on ground that's been used recently and very actively by livestock or by people's outhouses, should they still have such things, you are potentially in danger of sort of fecal cross-contamination. So please, be careful of where you're picking it from in that sense. The other thing is that if of the nitrates in it, you really need the sun to be shining on it for a few days if you're picking it from one of those sites, so that it decomposes and settles down the nitrates, which turn to nitrites, which aren't so good for the human body. Okay. And the other thing is, if you pick nettle when it's got sort of, I would say to people, it's when you get to about May, when it's kind of starting to look a bit duller and more sort of fiery. It's the calcium carbonate in the plant gets stronger, and that's when we don't use the leaves for medicine or for tea making, because that will be a kidney irritant to us. And indeed, I have experienced that myself. Obviously, I had bought some dried nettle in, and I'd been having some nettle tea, and I could feel my kidneys starting to ache. And I thought, oh, okay, that sort of nettle wasn't obviously a good supply. So you want fresh nettle when you're making it, either as a soup or if you're tempted to try and dry it yourself. We do gather the seeds later in the autumn, and maybe that's in the autumn I'll do one about the nettle seeds. So again, just the seeds are really tiny, but they're really nutritious. There's that, and we also use the roots medicinally, which have an affinity for the male reproductive system, as we say, and we'll come on to that in a moment about the different uses of nettle. The different uses of nettle historically, medicinally. So this one always makes people laugh or wince, I think, really, is the Romans are considered to have brought the nettles over, and they found our climate rather cold and challenging. And it's said that it was used for male impotence. So the nettles were used to thrash the male nether regions, which sounds a bit brutal, and maybe it meant that either men didn't complain of impotence or it was some strange practice that we don't want to go into here. However, there is some interesting correlation with modern scientific studies with how nettle is used, in that with prostate enlargement, which is usually as a consequence of the aging male, when the male hormones are changing, the prostate will enlarge because testosterone is decreasing. Now, within the nettle leaf, there are plant sterols. So these are steroid hormones in the plant, or components. They're not direct steroid hormones. I won't get into a complicated science lesson here. But if you're taking those, it's going to reduce the prostate enlarging. So that is one of the herbs that we can use in mixes, helping with those issues. Historically, it's used for women's courses and for stopping blood flow. So, heavy menstrual periods. It's also used for promoting breast milk. So, galactagogue, isn't that a great word? So, producing more milk. If there's poor flow in milk in humans or other mammals, and partly that's to do with its nutrition, the nature of nutritiousness. It's also a really great antihistamine herb and herb for allergies. So I use it a lot for people who have skin conditions. So we're talking things like eczema and psoriasis. And it's also used in hay fever mixes. And indeed, rather than exposing all my patients' secrets, I can say with my son, who has suffered from hay fever over the years. I mean, last year we were really diligent. I got him to be taking nettle from, I think we started in January off the top of my head, and he just took a dose of nettle tincture daily. And last year his hay fever was barely present, which was fantastic, especially as it was his GCSE year. He didn't have to resort to any over-the-counter antihistamines at all, and he actually really reduced it, because in previous years I'd made him up antihistamine hay fever mixes for when he was in the height of summer, and he barely used any last year. So that's just a little personal example, one of many really. So we can see with its antihistamine properties that it's good for hay fever from that. It also has an affinity for joint problems. It's got a long usage for people who have arthritic and rheumatic joint conditions, helping alleviate the swelling, removing toxins from the body, and that's externally and internally. So it helps the metabolism of the liver and the kidney. So anything that's promoting the good work of our excretory organs is going to reduce the load on the body of toxins that are building up around joints, and then added to that with its nutritious elements, with its I think I forgot to say it's also very high in vitamin B as well, and I mentioned the copper and the silica. These are all good helpful nutrients for our skeletal system and our nervous system, so that all helps when we're dealing with health conditions. It's also good at regulating blood sugar levels, so a hypoglycemic herb on that index there, so helping with metabolic processes and that overload. in our particularly sort of sugary world. So that's all good. It can be used equally, good measure, in your kitchen. Now, I think I've mentioned in one of my other videos how to make a herbal vinegar. You can gather up some of the early nettle leaves and put them in a clean, sterile jar. By that I mean you boil it. You put hot water in your jar, or you put it in the oven at a low heat for 10-15 minutes, so you've got rid of all the microbes in there, and then put in some cider vinegar, and then you can chop up some nettle leaves, and you can use the top half. You don't have to stick to the first 4 tips if you're making cider vinegar. Fill your jar up, and then pour your cider vinegar over, seal the jar, put it in in a cupboard or a dark space. You can shake it every day, or you can forget to shake it every day, and after about 2 to 3 weeks, all the nutrients from the nettle will have infused basically in suspension into the vinegar. And you strain that off, label it, always label your products, and you can use that in salad dressings. And I know other people like to drink cider vinegar as a morning thing with some hot water. So that's one of the kitchen uses. People use it, and I've done it in the past. You can make an infusion and use it as a hair shampoo, sort of bring glossiness to the hair. You can use it as a garden nutrient. If you're familiar with people who make comfrey feed in their gardens, you get a bucket, fill it full of nettles, put some water on, leave it to steep for 2 or 3 weeks, and then use that as a garden feed on your food, your vegetable crops or your rose crops. So it's, again, that nutritious content is coming through, to be very helpful for us. So I could go on and on, but you've got a sense, I hope, of its great place in the plant kingdom and its great place in helping human beings. So rather than being wary of the nettle sting, know that it's actually a companion of our living days. And actually, on the sting, I should mention to you, you probably know about nettle in and dock out. My favourite one to deal with nettle sting is plantain, Plantago lanceolata or Plantago major. And the final thing I'll say is, people say, can you use it for nettle rash? And indeed you can. You can make a lotion out of it, so again, infusion, or you can make an infused oil, and it actually helps with irritated skin and nettle rash. So that's all very fascinating, isn't it? So I've probably gone on long enough. It's time for you to maybe go out and try making your nettle soup if you're in the northern hemisphere, and if you're sitting watching this in the southern hemisphere, then you'll have to wait until your next spring. So thanks for listening. Do like and subscribe to my videos, and go look at my Facebook page, where I put up interesting articles about all sorts of things, not just coronavirus. And all be well, keep grounded, and take care, and see you again. Thank you.